titled When Doubts Arise. I'm just going to give you a little anecdote, supposedly true. It's apocryphal, which means that you don't really know if it's true or whether it's not, but it's possible that it may very well be true because there's some actual names in it. Lord Halifax, who was the Secretary of Great Britain, once boarded a railroad compartment, and he sat in between two older ladies, two very prim-looking older women. A few minutes before he reached his destination, the train passed through a tunnel, an unlighted tunnel. And in the darkness, he noisily kissed the back of his hand several times. When the train drew into the station, he rose and he lifted his hat and in a gentlemanly way say, "May I thank whichever one of you ladies I am indebted to for the charming incident while we were in the tunnel." He then made a hasty retreat, leaving the two women glaring at each other. Can you imagine their conversation after he got off that railroad car? "I didn't kiss him, you must have kissed him." The other one responds, "Well, I didn't kiss him, you must have kissed him." Doubt. All of a sudden, doubt. These two women who were good friends now, was it you? It must have been you. Certainly wasn't me. Now, shame on him for doing something like that, but it kind of shows how quickly the seeds of doubt can arise, even between two friends, even between ourselves and our God, right? Doubt is very much a part of the human condition. It impacts us all, no matter who we are, no matter where we've been, no matter how long we've been a Christian, no matter how long we've been alive, we have experienced doubt in our own mind. Without a doubt, we have experienced doubt. One of the most frequent and painful problems which plague Christians. We come into the world with question marks over our heads, and those question marks are never truly erased. People who are fervent, honest believers have doubt, and they've written books about it. They've asked the hard questions, never really getting an answer in the flesh, but having it revealed to them when this world is over. We're not alone, right? We read through Scripture, and godly men and women have had doubts. They've experienced those moments. Sometimes those doubts are fleeting. They're very, very much passing. Thomas doubted Jesus' resurrection. You remember the account, he says, "I will not believe." You know, and never mind that all of his fellow brethren had seen him. He'd already appeared to his fellow brethren, to the women and the men and his disciples, to Jesus' disciples. He'd already appeared to them. And they're saying, it was him. And Thomas says, "I will not believe until I put my fingers into the holes of his hands and into his side. I will not believe." The doubt came up. Why was that doubt there? Well, that was on Thomas's behalf. Why did he have that doubt? I don't know, but it shows that he had it. Thomas was an apostle of Jesus Christ, yet even he had his doubt. Even when all of his friends said, "We have seen him, we've seen him, we've seen the teacher, we've seen the master," even he had his doubts. Moses doubted he could take on Pharaoh and his vast kingdom, his powerful empire. "I don't think I can do this." We read of the account of him, his discussions with God, talking about, "I'm not a good speaker. I don't know if I can do this. I don't think I can. I don't think I can." Even with God himself, Thomas had his brothers and sisters making sure that he understood they've seen God. They've seen the Christ. They've seen Jesus. Here's God telling Moses, "You can do this. This is what I want you to do. I'm not going to send you to do something that you can't do." But even Moses, even when speaking with God, had his doubts about whether he had chosen the right one. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't think I can do this." And God, of course, speaking with him, led him to understand it's not a matter of whether you think you can or whether you think you cannot. It's a matter of me telling you you're going to do this. You will go and do this for me. You will act on my behalf. And we know that Moses went and it says that there was none like him before or since. Until Jesus came, there was no one so highly regarded amongst the Jewish people as Moses. His doubt was misplaced. What God believes erases all doubt. Gideon doubted God's plan and his call in his life, and he tested God not once, but he tested him twice. Gideon, this great, noble leader of God's people, had his own doubts. And God finally quelled those doubts and drove those doubts out, but even he had his doubts. Sarah doubted that she could have children. She laughed about it. How can I have children? I'm 90 years old. I have my doubts. Understandable. That's the flesh. That's the physical flesh. I mean, everything that we know, it tells us that a 90-year-old woman can't have children. God said, when I tell you something's going to happen, it's going to happen. Now, you can either believe it or not believe it, but it's going to happen. You can either be very surprised, or you can believe me when I tell you something. Doubt. There are four main causes that I can find. Number one is our circumstance. John chapter 20, I'm not going to read the entire chapter, but if you want to go ahead and turn it with me to John chapter 20. First thing that causes doubts, not necessarily the first thing, but one of the things that causes doubts in our minds and in our lives is our circumstances. Where are we? Where do we find ourselves when these things come about? I've found that oftentimes doubt really arises in our lives when we are lonely, when we are by ourselves, when we are not with our fellow Christians. And this is why I tell people, they say, well, I just can't, I just don't get as much out of church. I don't come into church every single Sunday and sitting in the pew and being there for so long, and I don't think I get anything out of it. And I said, well, you don't think you get anything out of it, but then don't come for a while and see what happens. Doubt starts to creep in. When you're not with your brothers and sisters in Christ, when you're not with the brethren, doubts will start to arise. And the problem is, there you are by yourself. There's no one to help you get past those doubts. There's no one to help you build up your faith. And we're going to talk about the idea of doubt and faith and what those two are to each other. There's no one to help you build up your faith. When you're by yourself, when you're lonely, when you're lying in your bed at night and you're thinking in those still, small, quiet hours of the morning, all of a sudden the doubts start to come in. We start to think about things in ways that are not conducive to faith. We become doubtful. Many times it's when we are sick, when we have physical issues, when we have physical ailments, people start to doubt. I know some folks who have chronic pain. Chronic pain, the idea, it doesn't go away. It might lessen somewhat, but it never truly goes away. There are people who are in pain constantly, and I can understand why sometimes that might lead to doubt. Is God still watching for me? Does God still know I'm here? I've prayed 100 times, please take this away from me. And I'm beginning to doubt that He's listening. Not that He's not there, but that He's listening to me, that He cares for me. And sometimes our circumstances give rise to the doubts that are in our minds. Circumstances. We see this in the death and resurrection of Jesus. Everything that took place on that resurrection morning shows that Jesus' followers did not expect Him to be resurrected from the dead. They misunderstood what He was talking about, the idea of tearing down the temple and building it back up again in 3 days. They misunderstood what He was speaking of. There's nothing to show that they expected Him to come out of that tomb, to not be there when they went. In John chapter 20, throughout that entire chapter, it shows that doubt and fear gripped them. From the time that He was arrested in the garden to the time that He was to be resurrected from that tomb, fear and doubt were gripping the disciples and the apostles of Jesus Christ. Mary Magdalene, the one from whom Jesus had removed 7 demons, believed that someone had come and stolen His body, maybe an enemy. They had come and taken His body. She was so distraught that there was not a body in that tomb. Where is He gone? Where have they taken Him? What's happened to Him? She wanted to go and be with Him yet again. She thought that somebody had stolen the body. Peter went to an empty tomb and wondered what had happened. We'd already told him what was going to happen, but even then he still wondered, what's happened? What's going on? Why is He not here? Mary thought that Jesus was the caretaker, and he asked him, do you know where the conversation must have been something like, where do you know where they've taken your body? Thought he was a gardener, a caretaker. Where have they taken the body? The disciples didn't even believe her when she said what she had told him. And then when Jesus appeared, the disciples were afraid and they thought He was a ghost. Thomas didn't believe the other disciples' report even after they had just seen this, and they should have believed every word that they said. He did not believe what they had just told him. Sometimes our circumstances can be so overwhelming that it causes doubt to take root in our lives. And it happens every single day. There is a brother or sister in Christ in whom doubt has started to take root. Their faith is not great. Their faith is shaken. Something has happened. Something has occurred in their lives, their circumstances, that sometimes are beyond their control. Nothing that they could have stopped or could have prevented. But those circumstances have occurred in their lives, and now, where before there was a great faith, now that faith has begun to be shaken, and now doubt has become to displace it. Now this once faithful person now is the one who's racked with doubt and fear that maybe their faith has been misplaced. They don't believe in the right thing. Maybe they've decided that the way that they're practicing their faith is no longer working because God's not answering their prayers in the way that they think that He should answer their prayers. All of these things occur because of circumstances in our life. Number 2, the second reason is other people. Isn't that sad? Isn't that sad? Sometimes other people are responsible for doubt beginning in our own lives. That's sad. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 3. If you want to turn with me, Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 3. One of the biggest influences of doubt in our lives is when we get around other people. You call them whatever you want to call them, doubt pushers, people who it's almost as if that's intentional on their behalf. They want to shake us. And sometimes they couch it by saying, well, I'm just telling the truth. I'm just giving you my opinion. I'm just telling you what I see. Well, at the end of the day, what they've done is they've pushed doubt on our minds. They've helped us, if not started us down that path. They certainly are assisting us in losing faith and gaining doubt. People do this to one another. And I hate to say it, but even in the Lord's church, there are those who want to pull down other people. They want to, I don't know if it's intentional to try to destroy faith, but there's certainly a desire there to make people see things the way they see them. The pessimistic attitude, it's not going to get any better. We've done that before. This isn't going to work. This isn't going to happen. You can't do that. This can't be accomplished. All of these things, there are those who cause doubt to rise in people's minds. And then we start to wonder, are we even doing the right thing? Are we even going down the right road? Let me tell you, it doesn't take very long for a church to become infected, in the true sense of the word, infected by those who do not seek the will of God, instead seek their own understanding. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 3. Think about those who have the ability to discourage and pull people down, as well as the others around them. They pull themselves down, and then they pull down everyone around them. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 3, for consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you, what? Become weary and discouraged in your souls. We have to be careful. We cannot allow people like that to have any influence over us. We instead need to exert our influence over them. That's what we have to do. We cannot allow someone like that to infect us with a negative, pessimistic attitude. Is it easier said than done sometimes? Yes. Sometimes there are people that we love and we enjoy, we care for them deeply, but we find that when we're around them, all of a sudden we walk away and we're not the person that we once were when we first walked up to them. We're different somehow. Our attitude has changed because they have changed our attitude. We have to be careful of such a person like that. We see a great example of this. Let me tell you, one of the greatest examples that we find in Scripture is in Numbers chapter 13. Numbers chapter 13. We find this when the 12 spies go into the land of Canaan. Told to go in and spy it out. Find out what's there. See what the people are like. See what the land is like. Are there farms? Is there farmland? Are there places where we can live? What are the cities like? Are they fortified? All of these things, they've been commanded to go and do these things. So these 12 spies go, and it actually lists their names so we know who these men were. They were not some nameless, faceless group of people. They were named. These were the spies, and they were sent over. We don't know how long they were gone. I imagine it was quite some time. The land of Canaan was a large land, and it says they went to every area in there. They saw all of the land. But they go into this land, and they travel around, and they see it. They spy it out. You know, they're making reports. And it says when they came back, they brought some of the fruits of the land with them. A bowl of grapes. They brought some fruits, some figs, and some pomegranates. They bring all of these things back. And it was greater than anything they'd ever seen before. It was truly a land of milk and honey. God was bringing them to a promised land. It was a beautiful place. But then the 12 come back. And that's where things go south. That's where the train goes off the rails, so to speak. They come back, and then they have to give this report. And we know what happens. We have 10 men who say, we can't do it. We can't do it. I like that idea. I don't like that idea. I like that the speech, because that's what we hear, right? We can't do that. We can't do this. Why? The people are great. The people are huge. They're giants. We're grasshoppers in their sight. Their cities are fortified. They've got walls. They've got armies. They've got weapons. They've got a king to lead them. They have all of these things. We can't do that. But we read of 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb. What was their report? They said, we absolutely can. And the reason that we can is because God is with us. We can take this. We are, the phraseology that they use is, we are well able to take the land. Because God goes before us. Now we've got 2 and we've got 10. And we all know which way the children of Israel went. Who did they listen to? Did they listen to the 2 godly spies who said, we can well take this land? Or did they listen to the 10 who said, we cannot? Well, we read where the people began to become afraid. They were terrified. He's asking us to do something that's too great. I don't know if they failed to believe that he was there, that God was there, that he would lead them into this land, that he would go before them and he would destroy these people before them. He would lead them into victory. There was a land that they had been promised for hundreds of years. Here's their opportunity to go over and take it. That's all he tells them to do. I want you to go over and take the land. Go over and conquer it because I'm going to go before you. But what do? We can't do it. I know what he said, and they didn't say this, but I'm paraphrasing here. I know what he said, but we can't do it. Folks, we got to be careful because sometimes that's where we find ourselves, even today in the church. I know God said to do this. I know God said that we can do this. I know God said that he would go before us to do this, but we can't do it. That was the attitude. And because of those 10 men, those 10 spies that came back with the bad report. Now, this is interesting. Joshua and Caleb and the rest of these spies all saw the same thing. They all saw the same people. They all saw the same cities. They all saw every bit of it. They all had the same experience. 10 of them came back and gave a negative report. 2 of them came back and gave a positive report. And the people were infected with the bad attitude. They were infected with the negativity. So instead of rising up and doing as God instructed them to do, to go into the land and to take it, instead they wander. Because God said, I will not give it to you. If you won't go and take it, then you're not going to get it. I will raise up another generation to go in and take the land, but you will not. So they wandered for 40 years. Instead of making that simple effort of walking across the Jordan River and going through to the other side, I wonder sometimes, I don't see where God told Moses to send spies. I think that was the mistake. Instead of just doing as God told him to do, instead he wanted to couch and make sure. There was no need to spy out the land. God had already said, I was going to give it to you. I was going to deliver you into that land. I was going to deliver the land to your hands. And instead of just going over and doing it, he couched it. He couched his approach to it. I'm going to make sure that we can do this. I'm going to make sure. He says, I want you to go and scout out, see if there's farmland. Of course there's farmland. God said there was going to be farmland. Are there cities? Yes, there are cities. God said there were going to be cities. So Moses had some doubts, and then the people came back and had even greater doubts. And then instead of conquering this land that had been promised to them, they wandered around in the wilderness for yet another 40 years until another generation came up. And God said, now, do as I told you to do. They walked across that Jordan River on dry land, and they walked over, and then there was no stopping them. Why? Because they did as God said. Their doubt was displaced by faith. Sometimes people cause doubt in our own minds. Next, third, comparison game. Listen, this is one of those that I don't think we speak of enough in the church. I don't think we address this maybe as much as we should. The reason that oftentimes doubt arises in our minds is that we start comparing ourselves to one another. This brother has this sister does this person has this ability, and and we start doing that. We start trying to hold ourselves up to someone else. Well, what has the God said in regards to that? He says, I've given everyone I've given everyone gifts according to their abilities. Right there, we should understand that we're not all the same. We are all equal in His sight, but we're not all the same. We need to quit comparing ourselves to others. We need to quit worrying about whether this brother has a greater gift or whether this sister has a better ability. No matter what it is, we are all given gifts according to our ability. Quit comparing ourselves to one another. 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 12 tells us that. It gives us that instruction. Because remember, let me tell you, and not only in the church but in life, we start doubting ourselves because we haven't achieved what we want to achieve in life yet. We're not where we want to be professionally. We start comparing our marriage to someone else's marriage. We start doing all of these things. And then there you are. There you are. Then what happens? We're stuck. Because now we are in comparison to someone else. 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 12 says, we do not dare to classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves. When they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they are not wise. So what happens when we compare? It's a mistake. It's a mistake. No one should compare themselves to me. I shouldn't compare myself to anyone else because it is a mistake to do so. It is not wise when we do such a thing. Why? Well, we know. That's when doubts arise. That's when we become fearful. That's when we become less confident in our own abilities as a New Testament Christian. And when that happens, doubt comes into our head, and then it affects our entire body. And then when that happens, we infect everybody else that we come in contact with. Someone who is like that never keeps it to themselves. It always ends up rubbing off on someone else unless they can get out of that doubtful frame of mind. Dangerous. Number 4, this will be the last. We're going to continue this lesson another time. There's more to it than this. Number 4 is our past failures. There's nothing that can damage our ability to serve God like dwelling on the past. We start thinking about how we used to be. We start worrying about whether we're going backwards instead of forward. And when we start to dwell on our past failures is when we fall apart. Paul, who, of course, of everyone that we read of in the New Testament, had the greatest reason to dwell on past failures. He was one who put people to death for believing in the Son of God. He was one that, if you look at his successes all the way up to his acceptance of Christ and his baptism in Jesus for the remission of his sins as becoming a New Testament Christian, everything up to that was a series of failures. He thought they were successes. He was trying to drive this new belief out of existence. I'm going to destroy this new church. We're going to destroy this blasphemous thing. And to his own reckoning, he had accumulated a great deal of success. He had destroyed Stephen, the first Christian martyr that we read of. He was putting people into chains and bringing them into Jerusalem to be judged and many times executed for their belief. To him, it was a great success. But then after he became a New Testament Christian and realized that he was fighting against God himself, he regarded everything he had done before that as an utter and abject failure. Now, he could have dwelt on those failures and said, I can't do anything. How can I possibly overcome what I've already done? I've damaged God and I've damaged his Son and his movement so badly. How can I possibly be of any kind of help or assistance to God? And God said, you do what I tell you to do, and I'm going to do everything, and I'm going to do everything necessary to put you where I need you. I'm going to take you where I need you to be. You're going to say the things I want you to say, and you will be a servant of mine. We cannot dwell on our past failures. I dare say if I started asking everybody, I want you to tell me, give me the thing that you're most ashamed of, your biggest failure in life. And I imagine there's some folks in here that probably say some things that would raise our hair. Our jaws would probably drop. I did not know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. You know the reason we don't know those things is because you're here. Because you're a New Testament Christian. And those things don't matter anymore. Those things have been washed away. We discussed that this morning. Our sins have been blotted out. They are remembered no more. Why? Because God has blotted them out and He remembers them no more. If He doesn't remember them anymore, guess what, folks? We need to let them go and let that source of doubt get out of our heads. Get it out of our minds. Get it out of our bodies. Get everything like that out of our lives, because when we allow those things to continue to fester in our minds, and when we continually bring them up and compare ourselves to what we used to be, it is a source of doubt, and doubt has no place in the mind of a Christian. Doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. It means it has no place there. It needs to be driven out. Next time, we're going to talk about what it takes, because there are ways that we can get rid of doubt in our mind. There are ways that we can have it excised, taken away, cut out, and displaced. And what do we displace it with? We displace it with faith. Because doubt is the antithesis of faith. Those two things are not compatible with one another. It's like oil and water. One is going to displace the other. What we want is faith. And when we have the kind of faith that we need in our minds, doubt is gone. Doubt is vanquished. And when doubt is gone, we can be the greatest servants of God that you can possibly imagine. When that's gone and out of our mind. There may be someone here who is experiencing that. Let me tell you, everybody here has. I've had my doubt. And with prayer, I've managed to drive those out. My faith has been strengthened. But you may have a problem with that this morning. There may be doubts in your mind that you need to have displaced with faith. You've come to the right place. We want to pray with you. We want to pray for you. Because we don't want those things in there, because you're not your best. I get a kick out of those commercials. Those Snickers commercials, they get the celebrities on there, and they're always behaving badly, and then someone comes up, says, "Are you hungry?" and they hands them one, and they eat it, and they go, how could you tell? You're not yourself when you're hungry. Well, guess what? You're not yourself when you're doubtful. You're not where you used to be. You're not where you need to be. So if you need that doubt displaced, you need faith put back in, you've come to the right place. We want to pray with you and for you. If you need the prayers of the congregation, please come while we stand and while we sing.